Hello everybody, it's another country backpacking tips video and this time Costa Rica. Do you know what, I'm just going to jump right on into it and I'm going to start with the hotspots. You know you want to go to Costa Rica because you've seen these amazing pictures and you've heard these amazing things, but Christian, where do I start? Where do I actually go? Assuming you are coming from the Panama direction, your first stop will most likely be Puerto Viejo de Talamanca, or it's just known as Puerto Viejo, which translates to Old Port, but you don't need to know that. Puerto Viejo is a laid-back beach town with strong Caribbean vibes. In the town there's loads of market stalls and restaurants, and the beach is pretty nice too. But walk just 15 minutes south from the town to Playa Cocles, and you reach the most stunning beach. You can rent a surfboard here, but I do warn the waves are extremely strong, so if you're a first-time surfer I would definitely proceed with caution. You can also cycle or moped 12 kilometers down south to the lively beach town of Manzanillo. I strongly recommend the hostel I stayed in. I actually did a tour of it in my video just here. It's a 5-minute walk from the centre of town. It's called Rocking Jays and it is pretty much the place to stay. You can opt for a tent, a hammock or a dorm. We first time round opted for a tent, which was actually really nice because for the first time you actually get some visual privacy because you get your own tent and you still get like a mattress, so you're not completely on the solid hard ground, although you don't get any sound privacy because the walls are obviously paper thin. We then tried the hammock option, which I was extremely skeptical about. I have a tendency in hostels to twitch just before I fall asleep. You know when you feel like you're falling and you're like, oh, like back awake again. I do that every single night in a hostel, and I don't know if it's because I know there's other people in the room so I struggle to fall asleep, like I don't even know. And so I thought that this was going to be a real big problem in the hammock, like twitch and I'll just fall out, but surprisingly it like properly cocoons you and I was actually fine. In fact, I didn't even twitch when I was in the this is so weird. But yeah, I didn't even twitch when I was in the hammock, so I'd say that was a success. And yeah, after all the music that goes out at 11 PM, I was out like a light. I literally could just rock myself to sleep and it was one of the best nights I had. It also has these massive lockers for you to put all of your things in, including your big rucksack. It backs onto the beach and it's just a pretty damn cool hostel. Next up we went to the capital city of San Jose. Now unless you particularly enjoy exploring new urban cities, I honestly wouldn't stay in San Jose, especially if you don't have all the time in the world. There's just not that much to do, but if you're flying into Costa Rica it will probably be into here. Then we have La Fortuna, which is a little town with the most stunning views of Arenal volcano. This is like activity central. Literally every other shop is a travel agency and you can do canyoning, horse riding, canopy, ziplining tours, and you can of course hike around the volcano and the lake. I stayed in Arenal Backpackers Resort, which I would recommend. It was great. However, it wasn't that cheap. But then again, you struggle to find any cheap hostel in Costa Rica, so... Our last stop in Costa Rica was Monteverde. This town is set high up in the mountains and again is the hub to so many amazing activities. Now personally, I thought that the activities, taking money spent versus quality into account, I thought that Monteverde was far better than La Fortuna. I mean, I love the ziplining that I did in Arenal, but the canopy tour that I did in Monteverde was cheaper and was so much better. I also found that the tourists in Monteverde were much more likely to be backpackers as opposed to in La Fortuna there was a lot more sort of families and family holidays going on, which made it a lot more expensive and catered for a more luxurious tourist experience, if you will. In Monteverde we stayed in the Monteverde Luxury Hostel. It was lovely, but it definitely wasn't the cheapest in town. Our problem was that all the cheap places were sold out when we got there, so I guess a tip for Monteverde would be, if you know when you're gonna arrive, to book a place in advance somewhere cheap so you're not ending up having to stay somewhere more expensive than you can afford. Now Costa Rica was a lot more expensive than we were expecting, so it was at this point that we decided we'd save our time and our pennies and go straight to Nicaragua. However, there were of course quite a few backpacker hotspots that we did miss, and I really hope to travel to them at some point in the future, and I will go through a few of them with you now. Over on the South Pacific coast you have Manuel Antonio. It's definitely one of the most expensive places in the whole of Central America. However, it's the amazing nightlife, beaches, restaurants, wildlife, everything that draws all the tourists in. Tortuguero, meaning land of turtles, up in the northeast is like the Costa Rican Amazon rainforest. So there is obviously plenty of wildlife to see here, especially turtles, hence the name, and their nesting season is April to May. Then over in the Nicoya Peninsula, you know that little snaggle on the left hand side, it's basically flooded with hippie surf towns. Some of the backpacker favourites including Santa Teresa and Montezuma down at the bottom, and Tamarindo up on the top left. And I say this in every video, but it's true every time. Of course, these are not the only places that you can visit in Costa Rica, just as much as not everyone goes to all of these places, like we didn't. But generally, these are the most popular backpacker hotspots. Right, so let's swiftly move on to budgeting. Costa Rica is expensive. Not compared to England or Australia, but compared to its neighbouring Central American countries, you need to budget a significant amount more. The local currency is the Costa Rican colon, but it accepts US dollars almost everywhere. The currency conversion currently stands at $1 to 534 Costa Rican colones. So if something was priced in Costa Rican colones, I would work it out by roughly doubling it in my head and then taking off the last 3 digits. For example, if something was 3,000 Costa Rican colones, I would double it, so that's 6,000, take off the last 3 digits. I guess that it was about just under $6. I hope that makes sense. Accommodation costs vary, but I found it averaged at about $16. Oh yeah. The cheap eateries, which are everywhere in Costa Rica, are called sodas. But even then, the meals cost around $5, so food and drink for the day I'd budget around $15. Travel costs were actually only marginally expensive than the rest of Central America. I reckon about $20-ish for a 3-ish hour journey. So saying I do that every couple of days, I'd budget about $7 a day for travel. And then the activities are not exactly cheap at all. But there is so much to do in Costa Rica that you're not going to want to miss out on any of it. Canopy, canyoning, bungee tours are going to be your most expensive, averaging about $50 for a half day. But of course, if you spend a lot of time surfing in the beach towns, your activity spending will be significantly less. But even then, I'd still budget $20 a day for surfboard hire and a few alcoholic bevies, which I still always include as an activity. So let's average the daily activity budget at $35 a day. And that brings us to a grand total of $73 a day. Now, that is a lot. And you know, you definitely can do it cheaper than this if you live off super noodles, stay in bedbug infested hostels and do nothing more than sunbathe all day. But what's the fun in that? I'm just trying to be realistic here. If you do end up spending less, then hooray! But the worst thing you can do is under budget for your trip and end up in a sticky broke situation, which is what would have happened to us because we were not expecting those kind of prices. But that is why we made a swift exit from the country much earlier than we planned. Now let's talk about getting around. The capital city is San Jose, like I said before, and if you are flying into Costa Rica, you will most likely start here smack bang in the middle of the country. If you are coming from Panama, your first stop will most likely be Puerto Viejo, or perhaps even Manuel Antonio if you're coming from down the south end. And if you're coming from Nicaragua, there are a multitude of places that you can go first, but it will most likely be La Fortuna or Tamarindo. The hotspots in Costa Rica are a little bit dotty, to be honest, so there's no most common route to visit them all. The best way to get around though is by public bus. You can book these on your day of travel at the bus station in town, which your hostel should help you find. The only exception is very remote towns, for example Monteverde, which is kind of in the middle of nowhere, and in towns like this it's a lot easier sometimes to get a shuttle. Hostels and travel agencies can help you book these shuttles, but I would shop around the different travel agencies in town just because a lot of the time the prices do vary, and you can also haggle the prices down. Be prepared to say Pura Vida all the time. Nicaraguan locals always take the piss out of this and it's very funny. Make sure you drink water from the coconut at least once. Costa Rica is one of the best places in the world to zip line and see wildlife and sloths, so don't miss out on that. It is also one of the best surfing countries, so if you've ever had an interest to try surfing, Costa Rica is definitely definitely the place to do it. But other than that, I think I'm done. I really do recommend visiting Costa Rica because it is an incredible country. I will definitely be going back there, especially to explore the Pacific coast, which I'm gutted that I missed. Just be aware that it is significantly more expensive than the rest of the countries in Central America, so make sure your budget is prepared for this so you can fully enjoy it and make it a country that you're proud to tick off your bucket list. I hope you enjoyed this video. Give it a thumbs up if you found it useful. Subscribe if you haven't already for more backpacking tips. And the next country I'm going to be talking about is Nicaragua. Ooh. So I will see you then. Bye!